Welcome to F4S Digital Events and today's Role Model Career Masterclass. Our guest speaker joining us today will tell their career story and share experiences, and then we will invite the audience, which is comprised of students at home, to ask questions. Thank you for being with us. My name is Neelam Jagate and I will be hosting the session today, and we hope to support students to make informed decisions about their future by offering career lessons, guidance and tips. To the audience at home, your audio, video and chat function has been disabled for safeguarding purposes, but you can still interact with us by using the Q&A box. And we are recording the session. It will be featured on our YouTube channel, so sit back and enjoy the webinar and do make some notes as well if you like. First of all, thank you so much, Chris Green, our guest speaker, for giving us your time today and for agreeing to share your story. So Chris is the Managing Director of Etherlive Limited, which you co-founded, which is very impressive indeed. And you have 20 years plus of management and enterprise IT experience. So we're really keen to hear from you, Chris, and thank you for being with us. So without further ado, we're going to kick off, and I'd like to hand it over to you, Chris. So we really want to know a little bit about your career and your life story, really, and how did you start off and how did you get to where you are today, and everything in between. So I'm going to give you about sort of 7-8 minutes, and then the students at home, please ask as many questions using the Q&A function, and I'll try to cover as many of those towards the end of the webinar. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. So if I go right the way back to school, back in the early 1980s, there wasn't the sort of level of careers advice and support that we have today in terms of the education sector. So when I was at school, fairly standard all-rounder in terms of academics. I was relatively good across most subjects, but had a more of a tendency towards the science subjects. And in terms of hobbies, I suppose I was lucky that it was the very early days of home computing and home gaming and things like that. And I was involved with that to a degree. And that was sort of a bit of a passion for technology and what was happening. So I was quite excited by that stuff, but really didn't have any clear direction. So I did a fairly standard broad set of O-levels then, GCSEs today. So all the 3 sciences and maths, English, all the usual stuff. And it came out with a fairly good set of results, but really had no career direction. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I sort of thought, well, I'll go on to college. My school didn't have a 6th form college, so I thought, well, I'll go to a 6th form college. And the sort of only direction I was getting was a little bit about, well, you're quite good at the sciences, you're quite good at tech, well, do something in that space. So I chose my A-levels, again, very sort of engineering or maths focused. I did maths, further maths, statistics, physics, and electronics. And that's probably lesson number 1 from my career. Way too many A-levels. Doing 5 A-levels was crazy. And that was because I was encouraged to do that. And really it had no value. I would have got better results if I'd actually just done 3 straight A-levels and focused more on 3 good solid A-levels rather than just spread too thin. And it made my 2 years at college not as enjoyable or as focused as they could have been, because I was just spread too thin. So that's one of my lessons, was actually know your limits. I was good, but trying to do 5 A-levels was crazy. As I went through college, I still really didn't have much of an idea of what I wanted to do, but it was the usual, it will probably involve computers sort of phase in the sort of mid-1980s. But at that time, computer science at university, and university was sort of first being talked about when I was at college. None of my family or anyone I knew had been to university from my background. I was very much a first generation person that was even considering going to university. And that was a little bit of a challenge because my parents didn't really understand why I wanted to go to university. And there was a little bit of friction there because they hadn't, and they were, why don't you just go and get a job? But I had this bit of a drive to go and try and get into university, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Computer science at that point was still seen as bit of a noddy degree rather than a real degree. You know, back then, I mean, it's changed a lot since then, but people didn't take it as a serious degree. So I was sort of put off from going down the computer science route, and instead everyone said, "Oh, go and do engineering." And that's what I actually did. I eventually got into Bath, and went to do electronic and communication engineering at Bath. And I guess that's sort of lesson number two from me, was that, you know, I went and did a subject because it was deemed a good subject to do, not necessarily because it was where my passion was. It was quite a heavy electronics focused degree, which wasn't really what I was best at. So it was quite a struggle academically for me to do that, when I should have done you know, something like a computer science degree, or at that point I discovered there were various management degrees and such like. You know, I didn't really have that careers advice to understand what options are available. That's a little different these days. And the lesson, I think, is to, if you go to university, choose the subject that you're actually passionate about and you really enjoy. Don't just do it because it ticks the right box. You won't enjoy your time. Now, the interesting spin for me is what actually then changed is when I got to Bath, I became involved with all kinds of different things. It was a complete life-changing sort of experience for me, and I still, whenever I go back and talk at universities or colleges, you know, very much talk about university as two things, and there is an academic part of it, and there is you as an individual growing up and learning about yourself and what you really want to do. And I became involved with the radio station, with the video station, with the Students' Union, with RAG, the charities organisation, and to a large degree, the events organisation. So I started organising events and working in that space, and had fantastic time. And a lot of the skills that I still use today came from my experiences when I was a student. And I spent 4 years as a full student, and then also in a sabbatical position, which is a full-time position at the end of your degree, where I was president of the Students' Union. And you know, the things I learned at that age, when I was, you know, in my early 20s, running an organization and involved with all kinds of different things, were fantastically rewarding and developed an awful lot of experience for me. So I reached the end of my time at Bath and still really didn't have a clear view as to what my career was going to look like. I took some time out. I did some consulting and some contracting work for a little bit, and went traveling for a long period of time, went traveling for a year or so, went around the world and stuff. And by the end of that, I came back, and at that point, I was looking at going into fundraising, because a lot of the stuff I'd done at university was sort of charity organized, charity orientated and such like. So I thought, well, maybe I'll look at going into fundraising full time. And while I was looking for jobs in fundraising, I started work for a small consultancy where I lived, doing some business consulting in the technology space. And what effectively happened over sort of six months or so is I realized at that point the fundraising industry wasn't really right for me at that point. It hadn't established itself in the way it is today in terms of professional fundraising. It was still a little bit different. And I was getting on very well in the technology space, realized I was actually quite good at being a technology consultant. So I took that more seriously and started off down that route. And that's probably sort of what then led me into most of my future career, although it will loop back eventually. So from there, I was sort of doing various more software orientated but technology type projects. And almost by quirk, by luck, whatever you want to call it, the company I was working for had a position in Intel Corporation, the semiconductor manufacturer. So I started to contract to them via my company I was working for a number of months. And within about 6 months, they wanted to headhunt me into the company full time. Now, this is, you know, another one of those little, I suppose, lessons or career things. You know, it's very, you spend a lot of time trying to plan out a career and oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, that, and the other. And to a large degree, you've got to go with the flow, and things will come up. You know, someone once said to me, as you go through life, you throw lots of little acorns out there, and every so often one of those acorns will seed and grow into something big. and you never know where these things are going to lead. So I was offered this job. Really didn't know that much about Intel at the time. I knew they were a big semiconductor manufacturer, but this is back in the sort of mid-90s, before we sort of really moved to where we are now in terms of technology. So I had no idea what was going to happen. I thought, well, I've never worked for a big company. I'll go and work for a big company. And I took up the role, and my first full-time position there was introducing this thing to Intel called the Internet. And that was my first project, was to actually enable one of the offices with a connection to the Internet. This thing that not everyone was allowed to use. It was privileged. You had to have special permission to use it. And from there, I then I moved into e-commerce very quickly and started developing systems for online commerce. Fairly rapidly, then moved to the US and lived in the US for a while, running their e-commerce sort of operation for all our online ordering system for Intel. Did that, came back from the US, then moved to another branch where we set up what these days you would know as Amazon Web Services, but Intel had its own branch called Intel Online Services back in the late 90s, very late 90s, early 2000s. Which you probably would never have heard of, but for example, we hosted the original Big Brother, the very first series of Big Brother. I actually worked on in terms of all the hosting arrangements for it. And I suppose that the thing from this is I went into a company thinking, well, I've no idea what it's going to look like, but it was a good company to work for. And at that point in Intel's development, when I joined, there were 20,000 employees. When I left, there were 130,000 employees. The company had grown phenomenally. And there are all kinds of different opportunities when you get into a company. And I changed jobs roughly every 2 years, which was the sort of norm within the company. You kept moving around. I did all kinds of different things. I traveled all over Europe, went to Russia, went to South Africa and US and all over the place, doing lots of different things. And you've really just got to make sure you're A, doing something you enjoy, but B, not be too worried about that. There will always be opportunities further down the road. So this went on for some time, and I joined the company expecting to stay there 2 years. In the end, I stayed 14 years. But towards the end, I had reached a point in the sort of mid-2000s where I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing anymore. I mean, it was a job, but I spent my life writing PowerPoint presentations, Excel spreadsheets, and managing a large function, which, okay, was good in some respects, but I had a nagging fear that was going to be the rest of my career, was just continuing to do what I was doing. And I'd always wanted to start a business, and that's really what I wanted to do when I left university, but I was too nervous about it when I left university. So I started to think about, a path forward in terms of what it would look like trying to move out. And it's quite hard when you're, by that point having, a wife, house, family, and all those sort of things, and you're in a very well-paying job, to think about leaving that and starting a business. But what happened was I was actually involved with another charity called Young Enterprise. And I've been working with Young Enterprise for a number of years. And they sort of run a lot of, actually the idea of running a small business for a year while you're a student. And I was at an awards ceremony, about to give out an award for one of the companies, and was sitting with a colleague of mine in the audience waiting to give out this award. And the event was going off the rails because the technology that was behind it just wasn't working. Nothing was working. It was all running behind schedule and all the rest of it. And I just basically turned to my colleague and sort of said, I wonder if there's an opportunity here to actually take what I would class as business quality technology into the events industry and do it properly, that there may be a business here. Now, this is back in 2007, when I'd been working on early generation smartphones and tablets and things like that, where we could see in Intel what was going to happen with technology in terms of its explosion to the masses, and how this whole idea of the internet, social media, etc., was just starting to sort of come onto the scene. So we went away thought about it, did various plans, and decided actually there's no one else doing it. We think there's a big growth here in terms of where that's going to go. Let's have a look at doing it seriously. And again, one of these little career things that just sort of happens, you know, you never can predict it, is we'd started work on that plan, and I was on holiday in Cornwall, funny enough, and I had a call from the director that I worked for at the time, who was based in Israel, who said, look, there's going to be a big change in Intel. We're going to start to, you know, shuffle things around, and the UK, where I was based at the time, is no longer going to be a primary place for Intel to be based. It'd been coming for a while. As these things go, most of the core development had moved out to Asia and moved out to India, South America, and various other places, and Russia. So we could see it was going to happen. So I had an opportunity, or a problem, depending on your viewpoint, which is I had a team of about 30 or 40 people at the time, and effectively we were going to completely get rid of that function. And one of the weirdest things I've ever done in my career is make my whole department redundant, and then myself. And we did it in a way that it went on for some time, but it gave me an opportunity, because it actually provided about a 6-month transition period for me to close down what I was doing in Intel and actually start up a new business. And it sort of worked okay. In fact, Intel were one of our first customers, so the relationship sort of maintained, which was good. But we started that in 2007 or early 2008. And that first event we did in 2008 was very much, you know, just very, very simple bit of internet connectivity to a small event, a rugby event, and another small show. But it proved very, very quickly that the demand was there. And we went from pretty much nothing through to the first 3 or 4 years through a global recession, which wasn't helpful, to really become an established player and change the dynamics of the way events work. When we first started going into some of the music festivals, there was a lot of like, why do we need the internet? Why do we need this? And such like. And there was a lot of hesitancy as to what it was needed for. It's quite funny, because if you now go and talk to those same organizers or those same events, it is one of their #1 priorities after their artists and their lineup, in terms of making sure all their services run. Why is that? Because what we do and what we provide is, you know, everything from the payment systems, the ticketing systems, the CCTV, etc. You name it. You probably don't realize when you go to a music event or any form of show how much is running on a technical infrastructure behind the scenes. So when we started out, we didn't really, I suppose, grasp what was going to happen. It was quite enjoyable. There was just 2 or 3 of us. We started the company, and it was, oh great, we can go to events, we can do this, that, and the other. And over those sort of what now is 10 years, we have, you know, grown into a point where it's an absolute critical function. So the stress levels and the criticality has changed dramatically, and we've been very lucky. We've got to work on all kinds of exciting events. You know, we've worked on the Olympics. We did a lot of work for that. We're bidding for some stuff for the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. We did a lot of stuff for the sort of Queen, actually, indirectly. We do a lot of her sort of the patrons' lunch, which was a big thing she did a few years ago. A lot of big shows, Chelsea Flash, and all that sort of stuff. So where this is going is that, you know, what I do today has probably now brought together 2 of my passions. I still love technology, and, you know, I still get to have an element of hands-on. I don't really do the real hands-on stuff, but at least I still play a part in what we're doing technology-wise. But it also brought back to the event side of things, which I've always really enjoyed. I've always enjoyed attending them, and there's nothing like being involved with an event when you actually behind the scenes bringing that event together, and you've suddenly got 50,000 or 100,000 people having a great experience. It's a very exciting thing. It's a very challenging environment. And I think for me, I'm a very practical person. I like to solve problems, and that is the events industry. You never know what the next day is going to look like. There will always be challenges, and the people that work in the events industry tend to be like that. because it isn't sitting behind a desk. There's no 9 to 5, there's no desk, there's no roof on the thing most of the time. You're out in the open, or depending on what you're doing, and it's very, very challenging. You go to an event not knowing what is going to be presented to you, and it can be some most random things. So some of the experiences I had, I mean, one of the most bizarre ones I had a few years ago is I got a phone call from a music festival that we work on, saying, "Oh, we've got a special request. Can you do a link up with the International Space Station?" And the deal is it has to be done from the event on a Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. And this was for a chap called Peter Gabriel, who runs the WOMAD Festival, who most of the younger generation probably won't have heard of, but older people may have heard of, but a very famous musician. But it was just totally bizarre. And there's photos of me and a colleague where we're in a marquee at the back of a music festival in a field in Wiltshire, with the International Space Station displayed on a screen in the background, and an astronaut, and there's a two-way video conference going on with this astronaut, and he's literally spinning the camera around saying, "Oh, look, I'll show you another bit of space, and oh, I'll show you over this." Very surreal. You just end up with these very odd situations. The events industry is fun most of the time, very stressful but fun. So what does all that say? Well, a couple of things. I think it's really, really important to do something you enjoy. It's too easy to chase money and a job that is seen as a very successful financial role rather than something you actually enjoy. And as you go through life, your priorities start to change, and you want to be able to enjoy what you do and have a good work-life balance, etc. The second thing is you've got to have some confidence that things will work out. That there isn't. You can spend too much time sitting trying to plan out a very clear path, which won't come to play. And when I left Intel, there was an author called Douglas Adams who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and one of his comments was, "I haven't ended up where I expected to be, but I have gone where I needed to go." And it's a bit of an odd comment, but when I left Intel, I realized that I probably wasn't expecting to jump off the way I did, but when I got out and started something different, I realized that actually was what I wanted to do, and maybe a lot happier in terms of doing it. Not saying it wasn't incredibly hard work, and I do a whole separate session on starting a business, and it's incredibly difficult. But in terms of ups and downs and enjoyment and experience, it's phenomenally rewarding. So, I think going all the way back to when you look at career choices or subject choices at the beginning, my view these days is keep it broad, do something that you're actually passionate about. There's got to be a real drive behind it, particularly if you're going on to college and university. Choose something you really enjoy. If you do go to university, use it as the opportunity to try all the things you may never get the chance to try again later in life. When I was, say, 16, 17, I'd had no idea I was going to do what I do now. And it's really important to try and experience that and learn what you're good at and what you want to do.
So, Chris, we have actually some questions, and I want to kind of hand over to the audience. But before that, I do want to say thank you so much for sharing so openly about your life and your career story. And it sounds like, you have, like you said, you change jobs every 2 years, and that seems to be the new norm now. And I think back in sort of my perhaps my parents' generation, that was unheard of. And you had one job and you stuck with that for almost the rest, the rest of your life. And this is really interesting for the audience as well. So we have got a few questions. Let's try to power through some of these. So firstly, what's the best young enterprise idea you've seen?
There was one that's been highly successful. This was a few years ago, and it was from the Southwest, a company that we represented, and it was a surf wax, but it was an environmentally friendly surf wax, because most surf waxes are obviously made of petroleum jelly type compounds, etc., and are environmentally very bad. So this school came up with an environmentally friendly one. I can't remember what it was called offhand, but it was actually taken up by a number of manufacturers and became very successful. That's probably the most successful one I've seen. Yeah, they went on, I think they won the national award.
Oh, wow.
And I think they certainly were placed in one of the European awards as well. It was a very successful product.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That was a good question. Thank you. And what are the sort of entry-level jobs which are available in your type of company, and what sort of skills do you need to get such jobs?
It's a really good question. A lot of people coming into or wanting to come into our sort of business think they have to be incredibly technical, and they don't. We have some pretty technical people, but I always look for passion, drive, enthusiasm, and the ability to learn. I'm far more interested in someone that can come in and look positively at a problem and say, right, we've got to find a solution to this, rather than someone says, oh, how do I do this? And sits back and just expects it written down on a sort of list of instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah, people will come to us, oh, I know this programming language, or I know that programming language, and that's all good, but I'm more interested in overall concepts. I mean, a lot of the people we want have to be able to deal with people. That's still probably what we do on a daily basis. Problem solve, project manage, and know how to find the solution to a problem.
Right.
One of the great things we have now is if you don't know how to do something, there will be someone else that will have done it. And you just look and you find, and then you interpret. And I think that skill of looking for information, digesting it, and then making your own opinion from it and understanding it is unbelievably fundamental to successful jobs now.
Sure.
The comment about you change jobs every 2 or 3 years, not only do you change jobs, but jobs evolve and change so fast. You can't train for a specific job that's going to be there forever. You've got to have that desire to learn, that desire to go and find out and just use the information around you. You can't be an expert in everything, but what you can be is very good at grabbing information from different places, analysing it, and coming up with a direction from it.
Thank you. And I think you've just answered the next question, which is, apart from academic success, what do you think are the 3 most important life skills and work skills? And I think you've done that quite well, so we'll leave that one for now. I think maybe the last question, when you left Intel, it must have been a difficult time. How did you turn the situation into an opportunity? Any general advice for turning difficult times into opportunities? Another really good question.
Yeah, it was difficult. There's always this sort of discussion you can have as to whether you should start a business later in life when you've got more experience, or earlier in life when you've got no responsibilities. I flip backwards and forwards between them, but I would probably err more to doing it earlier in life, because unless you've got an awful lot of financial backing behind you, starting a business later in life is very challenging. Although there are stories as well I can relate as to actually having too much money when you start a business is a problem as well. How can you turn it into a success? Well, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, most businesses are not actually amazing or come from fantastically incredible ideas. The vast majority are just the ability for you to do something slightly better than the next person. And what that really comes down to is being driven, organized, disciplined, and actually just working damn hard. There is no miracle source to most businesses. Most of the successful ones come from people that are very, very driven, that can just constantly look ahead as to what they need to do to get to the next step. There are always ways of selling and creating at least some form of revenue. Most businesses go out of business because they're not managing their numbers very carefully. They're not looking at their cash flow and their P&L, etc. But there's one of the strategies we used when we started off. We knew, and it's quite specific to our industry, I suppose, but we weren't experienced in the events industry, so we knew it was probably going to take at least 2 years for us to establish ourselves in the events industry, which is where we wanted to be. So we had a multi-pronged approach. What were we good at? We were pretty good at IT consulting because we'd come out of Intel. So we did some consulting on the side. So we basically created a little bit of revenue from just doing some bread and butter consulting work while focusing on our long-term strategy, which was to grow in the events industry so we could pay our bills and sort of keep going. The other thing is you use your contacts. I always say now to anyone from pretty much 16 upwards, you should be building a LinkedIn network. As much as most 16-year-olds will say, oh, it's not really, what have I got to say? If you start around 16, 17 and start to build those contacts up, it will be a key part when you get into your 20s, etc., of your network. So we now work at a number of the biggest music festivals in the UK. That came from a friend of mine who I had worked with at Intel. Turned out his wife's sister was involved with the Green Man Festival in Wales, which at the time was quite a small festival. And he got us an intro into her, a lady called Fiona. We went and met her, and she was like, oh, I don't really know what we need this for, but come along and do something. We went to that festival, did some services there. It was very successful. Turned out there was another chap there who worked at the WOMAD Festival, who saw us operate at Green Man. So he then took us to WOMAD, so we took on the WOMAD Festival. They were then connected with a couple of other festivals who then got us into that, and suddenly we started to have a whole chain of festivals that came together. And that was all through just the network, the personal reference and the networking side of things. So building your network and using those networks, you never quite know when people are going to pop back up with suddenly a very good link that can take you into new places. So always look at building your network in the right way. It's absolutely critical.
Thank you so much, Chris. So we have run out of time, unfortunately, and I wish we had a bit longer with you, Chris, because actually you've got some really useful, I think, lessons for young people, and some of the takeaways that I just want to share. And just to sum up, some of the things that I really liked hearing was that actually know your limits and don't take on too much, because actually it's not going to work out in the way that it should, perhaps. And also don't pick a subject that is deemed a good subject. Do something that you're passionate about, and I really like that, and I think a lot of young people at home will be able to resonate with that as well. So also another thing was to at university you gained loads of life skills that you're now using even till today. So please don't turn away any opportunity, and don't close doors, and keep those doors open. So yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to the audience at home for such amazing questions. They're really wonderful. You will be asked to leave some feedback so we can continue to improve our services. So please do complete those, and look out for the recordings on our YouTube channel as well. And please continue to like us and follow us on Twitter, I think Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram as well. Our next session is actually this afternoon at 12:30. It's a Maths for Girls event, so please do join. And we have another one at 2 o'clock, which is all about a career in construction. It's a little bit different, but please do join. So just pop onto our website and click the banner at the top for further details. And we hope to see the audience there again. Thank you again, Chris, and thank you to everyone at home. And we will have to leave it there. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.